Panthers at Giants. Like, another kind of ugly week 2 game, but still an NFL game, still fun to talk about. So this Panthers team, right, they come off a really tough loss to the Browns, but frankly a game they probably should have got blown out a lot worse in. And some takeaways on offense, both bad and some a little bit good, I would say. Mainly, as far as the good goes, that Ike Ekwonu is probably really good. He did end up, over the course of the game, losing to Myles Garrett some, but he held him in check for almost a full half or more, and it was actually really impressive, I thought. Baker, on the other hand, Billy did not look good in the slightest. Like, really, really bad. So we'll see if that gets better in this one. And this Giants team, though, coming off a win in week 1 over a favored Titans team, and a lot of it was to do with some pretty good coaching, some really, really good team effort on the defensive side of the football. And overall, I would say a pretty encouraging game. But how did the teams match up in this one? Well, for this Panthers offense, right, we start with the run game, and there, you know what? They actually look like they'll be okay. This Giants team did end up doing a lot better as a run defense into the Titans than I expected last week. A lot of that on the strength of Leonard Williams up front, Dexter Lawrence, and some pretty good play, especially from Jihad Ward, who was kind of awesome in that game. Is that going to continue, though? I kind of have my doubts here, because on the interior, while Pat Elflein is still really bad, and Brady Christensen, Austin Corbett, all are a little bit vulnerable to these Giants defensive tackles, again, especially Leonard Williams. I don't want to completely overstate their impact, because Leonard Williams and Dexter Lawrence, for as good as they are, they're not Aaron Donald. They're not even really up to the level like Deron Payne and Jonathan Allen in their own division. And that's not a demerit to them. Those guys are all really, really, really good, and that's the case here. But I do think that they're not quite the individual run complete stoppers that some of those other guys are. Leonard Williams are pretty close. And on the edges, those tackles are really good. Taylor Moton and, like I said, Ike Ekwonu, I thought was really impressive in week 1. And with the injuries on the edges that the Giants are still going through, I really have worries that they're going to keep up what they did with the Titans. The Titans, frankly, did not call a very good game at all in that one. And while their run blocking was fine, they had some issues at the second level. And again, they're just creatively not really there. The Panthers, for as kind of meh as they are, I think are at least a little bit better, or will be in this game. Jihad Ward, for as good as he was, like I said, I don't know that he matches up quite as well. And O'Shane Ximines and Tamon Fox, who ended up kind of rotating in there on the edge. Again, I have doubts about them long-term as run guys. So I think the Panthers are going to be able to kind of run the ball here. Christian McCaffrey, again, is still really, really good. There are chances for big plays. The Titans had some big plays themselves. It's not like they couldn't run the ball in that game at all. So I do end up liking the Panthers at least a little bit there. But in the passing game, the more important side, right, how does that look? Well, this is where I think the Panthers actually have a bit of a chance here. Because their offensive line, like I said, I think it does handle this Giants scheme pretty well, mostly because their edges are just clean here. I think Taylor Moton is really, really high end, like I already talked about, their other tackle, their rookie. And these Giants, last week they relied a ton on a bunch of goofy-ass blitzes that really didn't even end up getting all that home a lot of the time. And while that's going to be the case again here, I do have some faith in this Panthers offensive line to kind of stand up to that. I'm really worried about Pat Elflein and their guards on the interior against Dexter Lawrence and Leonard Williams. But like I already mentioned, those guys aren't the complete offensive game plan destroyers that maybe you're hoping for. So there are some chances for the Panthers to be for Baker to kind of be okay back in the pocket. And more importantly, the Giants are down some corners here. And so while Adoree Jackson is still there at the top and is a good player, you're talking about probably Justin Lean as their other corner and Darnay Holmes playing a lot from the slot. Darnay Holmes is a player who I have big-time issues with. I think he just gets cooked all the time when he's on the field. And Justin Lane, for his, as he was at times with the Steelers, I have very little faith in as well outside of that Steelers comfy scheme for corners. And I'm worried because DJ Moore and Robbie Anderson are still really good players. DJ Moore was shut down a little more than I was hoping for against the Browns. The Browns ended up throwing out 3-4 actually good corners, even despite the loss of Greedy Williams. And these guys here are just nowhere near that level. So I do like the Panthers wide receivers to actually win quite a bit in this matchup. And for as much as I do like Tay Crowder and Xavier McKinney as matchup guys, you can't keep up with McCaffrey And Kareem Hunt kind of showed that last week that they were going to struggle a little bit with running backs out of the backfield. So there are chances for Baker Mayfield to move the ball in the air. And for as bad as Baker is, and I do have worries with him into the scheme for sure, I think there's at least enough success there that I have them at 16-24. Mostly on the strength of their offensive line and their receivers. So can the Giants keep up with that? Well, this Giants offense last week was pretty bad as well. They did have some big plays, though. We saw the return of the high-end play of Saquon Barkley, and they do have at least some encouraging stuff to take away from that, although I'm more going to put that down to I think the Titans' defense is kind of sneaky pretty bad, and they only got 21 points anyway. So can they run the ball here? Well, this Panthers defense actually was pretty decent last week. They gave up a ton of yards, but it's the Browns. It's basically the best rushing attack in football, or one of them, and a lot of that was some really big plays or really, really talented running backs, and against worse rushing attacks, I think they're going to be better, and that's the case here. Saquon Barkley, he has those big plays, but he's not nearly as good on a consistent level as Nick Chubb or even Kareem Hunt, so I'm not as worried about that. And listen, this offensive line is still really vulnerable, especially on the interior. Mark Lewinsky can lose at times. John Feliciano's fine as a center, but this left guard spot, both these guys, Ben Bredesen and Josh Ezeudu, were kind of absolutely awful in week one. It was shocking how bad they were, to be honest with you, especially for the Giants to succeed in spite of them. And that was against an interior that really was just Jeffrey Simmons. Jeffrey Simmons is really good, but their other guys are kind of And here, you have two players of that level, and Derek Brown and Matt Ioannidis, guys I expect to really, really control the game on the interior here and give those guards and even John Feliciano at center a ton of issues. So I don't think you're getting much push there. And on the edge, Brian Burns, he's developed into a pretty plus run defender, and Yetur Gross-Matos and or Henry Anderson or Marquise Haynes, whoever's on the other side, are at least strong veterans, and or Gross-Matos, who's actually pretty talented still, and I kind of believe in as a player. And I think they can win. Andrew Thomas I like a ton. He's ended up kind of proving me right as far as he's a really good player, but he's not this amazing run guy. And Evan Neal, frankly, wasn't that good either. And that Titans team has pretty bad edge players, and Evan Neal still losing to like Ola Adeniyi pretty frequently. So I'm actually really worried about him into this Brian Burns matchup. So I don't think they're really going to be able to run the ball that well. I should mention that they're going to still hit some big plays for sure, because the Panthers linebackers are absolutely horrible in the run game. But Corey Littleton is kind of a disaster, and Shaq Thompson, for every one play he does make that looks kind of cool, he is out of position and gets absolutely eaten up by offensive linemen like 5 times. So that worries me. They do have Jeremy Chan, Miles Hartfield as good box safeties that can make up for some of that. And Frankie Louvu, I got to mention, is one of the most underrated run defenders in the league. But overall, the point is, I think this Panthers defense, for as much as they can give up some big plays at times, which does absolutely come into play here, given the way Saquon Barkley plays football, are mostly going to do a just fine job. So then in the passing game, how's Daniel Jones look? Well, like I already mentioned, I'm really worried about the interior pressure in this game. I think you are going to see some kind of bad reps from Evan Neal against both Brian Burns and even Yetur Gross-Matos. The Panthers do some interesting blitz stuff at times too that worries me. So I think Daniel Jones is going to be under siege a little bit. And the Panthers have done a good job of, J.C. Horn is really good, or is pretty good. C.J. Henderson is pretty good. They stole him from the Jaguars, really. Dante Jackson has his horrible issues at times, and I don't really like him as a player, but he can keep up with certain styles of receivers, which I actually think does come into play against this Giants team. And frankly, the Giants' offensive scheme last week was kind of bad. They, despite the talent they theoretically should have at receiver between Sterling Shepard and Kadarius Toney, Wan'Dale Robinson before he was hurt, and Richie James, all good to very good players, they didn't really use them or ask them to beat guys in ways that were really constructive, and that concerns me here because I don't think they're going to be beating J.C. Horn and C.J. Henderson just on talent alone all that frequently. And like I said, with Dante Jackson, I think he can run with those guys, at least to a point. Darius Slayton, too, if he ends up playing. I don't know what the hell's going on there. And Xavier Woods, as a safety, was, again, probably first team all week one, was absolutely awesome in that Browns game. And all of those together kind of make me say, well, you're talking about Daniel Jones behind a not very good offensive line, probably, or offensive line at the very least. It's going to struggle in like 3 or 4 out of 5 spots. throwing to what positive matchups. Sterling Shepard and Richie James are good enough that they're going to win short. They barely use Kadarius Toney. I don't know what really was going on there either. They're throwing up David Sills a lot for some reason, which I don't expect to go well. But none of those guys are going to consistently drive the ball through the air, get open a ton into this Panthers secondary. And while Saquon Barkley helps in the receiving game too, I don't know that it's enough, so I don't have a ton of faith in this Giants offense in this one. I think 13-20 is even maybe being a little bit generous and is more of a – I think the Panthers have some real holes, specifically the linebacker, than the Giants are really doing anything impressive. But and Baker also, he's good for a bad pick or fumble or two himself. But overall, listen, I think the Panthers are going to win this game. They're just a bit of a better team. Daniel Jones is still definitely not that dude, and their defense, for as good as they are coached, I think has some real talent issues. So with the betting, though, I don't like this game at all. It's just an ugly game with bad quarterbacks, and there's not enough of a killer advantage with either team on the ground or with any individual receiver matchup that makes me say, oh yeah, no question. So I do like the under, but with how fumble prone and interception prone these guys are, that could kind of run up the score here a little bit. So not anything I love. I do feel good about where I am with the Panthers as a team. Absolutely. We got that Browns game right last week. And with the Giants, that Titans game was really kind of goofy, hit or miss. I don't necessarily feel bad about predicting that one wrong, and I think it was more I didn't lean hard enough into my concerns about the Titans as opposed to me being like, oh, the Giants were way better than I thought they were. But I feel pretty okay about this one. Not amazing, but I do definitely like the Panthers to win.